Welcome back, Tribe. Have one here from Talk TV again. Young white women fetishized by young men from other countries. They're starting to ramp up the messaging on this.
You saw this story today. 3,000 incidents of violence against women and girls every single day, up 37% in 4 years. The National Police Chiefs Council and the College of Policing are talking about a change of the whole system to turn the tide without meaningful collaboration action, and women and children will continue to be failed. Well, you know, nice words, but what's going on here? Because that is not going to cure this problem. What's happening?
Yeah, so there's a number of things happening. First of all, there's a proliferation of what I'd call the pornification of society. Look, I'm not a reborn Mary Whitehouse. If people want to watch pornography and they're adults and they go and get a DVD from a shop or whatever, that's one thing. But what you have now are these user-generated porn websites where anybody can look at them regardless of their age, and the content on these websites, it's just horrific. It's extreme. So that's one element. And what these reports don't say is the average number now of the perpetrator is 15 years old.
Wow.
The average age of the victim is 13 years old. This is child-on-child sexual violence. And what is happening is this is within families. This is cousins. This is brothers and sisters. This is because children, this isn't about Andrew Tate. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Andrew Tate, but this isn't about him. This is about children watching adult content and trying to process it and acting out behaviors they're seeing online. That's one element. The other
Shocking that when you hypersexualize society and put the power of the internet in a child's hands, that they begin to get corrupted and go down a degenerate path where they're consuming this kind of content and start acting it out. You mean their vulnerable little brains can't handle this kind of content. And then you wonder why they're pushing the rainbow and gender ideology messaging on the young kids so hard.
Other element, which is something I've been talking about a lot, is the fact that we've had a huge influx of men from different cultures where women, frankly...
They're saying the quiet part out loud now. It's not our own men doing this. It's all of a sudden the mass migrants that we've invited in our countries. We're saving the world. Angela Merkel's policies. Yes. Blowback years later after opening Europe up to third world countries is having detrimental effects on the stability and safety of Western nations. Who could have seen that one coming?
Do not enjoy the same sorts of rights that they do here. The right just to be safe in your own home. The right not to be battered by your husband. The right not to be harassed on the street. So that's another element of all of this. And you mix the two together, where you've got men from cultures where women frankly walk around in hijabs or they're not allowed out without a male escort. You've got people traffickers saying, oh yeah, come to England. You should see the women there. They're looking at online pornography and they're seeing a lot of women who frankly look like me and not like the women back at home. You mix all of that together with at the same time, the narrative that women should go out and be free and enjoy the world. And if you think that there's a man from another culture who you're a little bit concerned about, you're probably a racist. So check yourself with the way you act. Meaning that women are losing their self-defense mechanisms. You mix the whole lot together and you have a cocktail for horror. And those statistics, that report says 3,000 cases of violence against women every day. Violence. What about the harassment? What about following people down the streets?
Because you've had that yourself, haven't you? You're telling me in your walk from the station to your house. And I think a lot of women experience this. And what I'd like to ask you here, the police, as you quite rightly alluded to there, Alex, are sort of saying, oh, well, it's down to all these awful male influencers like Andrew Tate. Well, I would suggest that one of the other causes of this problem, and I know this from you and from other women who have complained to the police are not exactly particularly proactive on this kind of issue. They ought to have a look at the plank in their own eye before taking splinters out of someone else's, right?
And frankly speaking, Andrew Tate and influencers like Andrew Tate are basically a symptom of a bigger problem. It's a bit like talking about weight loss in the context of cancer. What we're talking about is a whole generation of men who are being brought up on instant gratification, all of the cultural mores that we once lived by, which was man and wife and nuclear family and fidelity and respect. That's all been destroyed at the altar of wokeism. Christianity's been given a kick in the rear. And now everyone's creating new
What?
religions where if a man puts on a frock and comes in the bathroom, then that's wonderful. That should be celebrated. Fetish is a wonderful thing that we should all embrace. Isn't it gorgeous? It's ridiculous. And it's no surprise to me that these statistics show that in the last 4 years alone, that the rate of violence against women has gone up, because actually the situation has completely mushroomed. Whenever I talk to people about this,
Who voted for these policies? What demographic overwhelmingly voted for these policies? Which demographic is overwhelmingly paying the price for these policies? Which demographic overwhelmingly doesn't feel safe now going out at night, going out on public transportation, being by themselves? Which ones are complaining overwhelmingly about being catcalled, being the victims of misogyny, the victims of SA and other types of assault where men don't care about them. They look at them like they're pieces of meat. They walk around dressed provocatively. These men are coming from conservative cultures where women are wearing, like she said, hijabs are completely covered up. And you go into a Western world and you see these blonde white women that you've been seeing on TV, and they're wearing skimpy outfits and they're getting drunk at night and they're acting like, oh my God, something you've never seen in your country. And so you treat these infidels like dog. It's no surprise that this stuff is happening. You take two incompatible cultures, you invite a group of people in your country in mass amounts of numbers with no plan to integrate them. Your policies are complete shit. You don't even check these people background-wise, where they're coming from. They throw their passports and other forms of identification off the boat in the water right before they make landfall, and then you just accept them as asylums. And now countries are actually weaponizing, like Belarus was flying in Syrians, Afghanis, and whatever else. People don't know this, but there's now weaponized migration happening in Europe, where infighting is going on amongst European nations with different value systems. For example, say Belarus, obviously as a dictator, the EU doesn't like that. They try to punish. So the dude was flying in a ton of migrants and just shipping them across the border in, I believe, Poland and Lithuania. We'll cover that a little later. But again, and then saying that these people will not have a way back. So they're pushing them to the front lines, to the borders, and then taking away their identification. Of course, the migrants want to come. It's better countries than where they're from, but it's weaponizing it on purpose. And these people are getting their quote asylum, oftentimes making more money, getting paid more sustenance and relief than the locals are. That's the part that hurts the most. You're going to work at your shitty job, barely affording heat, electricity, groceries, and then a migrant, an asylum seeker comes over and the government just opens up the checkbooks for them. This is what the local populations are having enough of. And we're not even going to talk about, we don't have to even talk about how the grape capital of the world, or at least Europe, is Sweden. Dude, the Nordic countries were the safest, the models of safety, progressive vision, egalitarian, feminist utopias have turned into shitholes when they started allowing these people and have no plan of integrating them. No one says migration or immigration is bad. No one says that. Mass migration, mass immigration with no checks and balances is bad. We all want to import the best and brightest in the world. That's a gem for every country. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, Arab, Afghani, Marsman, gray heads, green skin. We don't care. Are you a doctor? Are you an engineer? Do you develop rockets and advanced cutting edge technologies? Are you in Silicon Valley? Are you doing something crazy with applications, AI, all this stuff? Are you bringing your expertise to this country, providing jobs, starting businesses? That's what we want more of. Doesn't matter. You could be the rich black African businessman that just developed a groundbreaking technology that turns salt water into sweet water and regenerates soil that's been otherwise destroyed by monocrop agriculture and blah, 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 blah. Nobody gives a shit. You come to Europe with that technology, you help the local population become a net positive on society. They welcome you with open arms. They look at you as one of the good migrants, one of the good immigration policy examples to set forth for everybody else. We want more of that. Every country wants more of that. But when you just bring in the dusties, the dirties, the absolute poors, the uneducated, the criminals, and then you try to integrate them in society haphazardly with like giving them stipends and basically paychecks to just live for free and put them in housing that otherwise used to go to locals that the locals can't afford. And you wonder why you're destabilizing society. Now people are getting pissed, dude. And Europe is moving what they call far right. They're fighting against these immigration policies. It's become the number one talk in Europe. Actually, Europe just changed recently their immigration policies to allow for pushbacks on the borders. Pushbacks are basically when countries are allowed to send migrants back to the very border they crossed. That used to be not allowed. All the human rights organizations in Europe and the world were fighting against that, saying they're violating human rights. Now Europe's going, no, you can actually break international law now, and you can do pushbacks to secure your border. It's happening. These people will be kicked out. There's policies being enacted every day now. Far right are taking more seats. Far right. It's just border control and immigration. We want safe societies. Western Europe looks like a hellhole now. They're looking at Eastern Europe. I live in Romania, dude. I live in Bucharest. It's one of the safest cities you can possibly visit right now. There's very little immigration. The immigrants that are here are working in those jobs where they're just delivering food or working in construction. It's like Nepalese people and whatever else, but it's checked for the moment. We don't have unchecked mass migration. There isn't ghettos and tents and open markets being set up in our cities. The streets are clean. They're being cleaned every day by workers from government municipalities. It's nice, bro. It's safe. You could go out at night at 4 a.m. No one's going to tell you shit. You can't do these things in Western Europe. It's gotten insane. So I'm not surprised that these are the conversations that are being had right now. If you've seen the dichotomy between Eastern and Western Europe in terms of crime and safety, it will absolutely shock you, man. There are videos that go viral here locally of Romanians going overseas. I shouldn't even say overseas, going to like Paris, going to London, going to parts of Germany and being shocked, dude. Shocked. They go, this is Paris? This is London? Where's the Parisians? Where are the Londoners? What is going on here? It's like open markets of like shit you would find in some countries that these people are coming from. Like little stands on the side of the road. Bro, that shit is wild to see how in a few short years with unchecked migration that Europe's completely flopped and now the East is safer than the West. And now the East is somewhere where you want to start a family. Is the East perfect? No. They lack infrastructure still outside of major capitals. I can tell you right now, healthcare won't be as good still for the moment. You can get private clinics where healthcare is just as good, but again, they're private. General healthcare is just not as good. General education just not as good. Universities, I have to say, as far as research goes into cutting edge, the West is still better, of course, by a mile. But the problem is your child is at risk for being indoctrinated into woke ideologies. I don't know, man. If you got a remote skill or you can get hired at a multinational company that has a headquarters or a regional headquarters here somewhere in these countries, that'd probably be your best bet. You're going to make great money, be in a safe community. This is what's happening with the Middle East. They've invested so much, like places like Dubai. We can call them shitholes and we could say it's just a mirage in the desert, but it isn't. If you're raising a family, you have access to some of the best healthcare in the world, the best housing, no interest. You're not getting wrecked on anything. And overall safe community, no rainbow shit being pushed in your face. Nothing, bro. It's just safe. Your kids are going to nice academies. You have access to the best hospitals and the latest tech. The city is clean. Everything is safe. You could be out at 5 a.m, 3 p.m. Doesn't matter. No one's going to ever do anything. Security all over the place. It's beautiful to see what a country and a city should look like when it's run properly by people that care about it. And that's the problem. You are currently living in a nation that doesn't care about you.
Anecdotally, like I've spoken to you, Kev, I say that, I've been living in London for 10 years and I found that things have changed in the last 2. Yes. I've lived here about 8 years, completely fine. I'd walk to the pub, back from the pub, completely, by myself, happily, felt safe. Violence and harassment are through the roof. And any woman walking the streets of London who frankly is attractive to an opposite sex is going to know this. To coin a term of the left wing, lived experience. Now you've got a lot of women banging the drum going, it doesn't happen to me. I've never had this. Why don't you like diversity? And I'm like, well, do you have long blonde hair? I mean, seriously, if other people can talk about lived experience, so can women, young white women who look a certain way, which is fetishized in pornography, which is fetishized to these young men from other countries. Then we actually have a completely different day-to-day existence from other women wading in there trying to silence us.
Now, shutting down big mouth con men like Andrew Tate, I don't think is going to solve the problem. What do you think could at least alleviate this alarming explosion of violence?
We've already been telling you.
What might solve the problem?
Okay, well, I mean, I don't want to be pessimistic, but frankly, the horse has already bolted.
I get that, yeah.
Immigration policy. But we need to have an adult conversation about pornography. I'm not a prude, but when it was sort of like still pictures in a magazine, when it was DVDs that people had to be 18 to rent,
Adult entertainment isn't the problem. It's the fact that you're teaching men, especially the local men, white men, basically, that white men are evil, that the patriarchy is evil, that the societies they built for is evil and only benefits them. And they should check their privilege and basically not even look up to speak to a woman. And then you institute policies that put women first and female supremacy and create a gynocentric society where men shouldn't have a voice because they're men and they're privileged. You created this division in these genders of men and women where men don't care about what happens to your blonde, pretty white women anymore. You've invited and voted for all these migrants and all these policies that have destabilized society. Go ahead. A lot of these men are now looking to go overseas themselves and leave. It's so sad that you can't live in your own society, that you have to be quiet and you can't say things out loud like your own opinions because you'll be called racist right away. But somebody else from another culture can speak up for you on your behalf and nobody will say anything because they're the protected class now. It's insane, isn't it? How when you go to college, you're being indoctrinated against the college campus is toxic to white males. But then you go out into the workforce and still it's hard to get a job because there's quotas and diversity and inclusion and DEI policies that we have to institute, which means you're at the back of the line, buddy, even though you could be the most qualified one. Doesn't matter. We got to push a woman in there. We got to push this other person of color in there. We got to do why? Why is this not on merit? We've instituted racist policies and society has become more and more extreme because it's not based on merit anymore. It's just based on identity. Well, welcome to an identity driven society where identity politics reign supreme. And it's not about the best outcome. It's not about meeting in the middle. It's just about giving to those that we deem, through magical boxes we've created, most in need. It's all become a massive grift and society's being sold out from under us.
That was very different to the content that is widely available to everybody online, regardless of age. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, if you're having a lot of men in from a different culture, then surely they need to be spoken to about the way we do things here. That would be at least a start. The third thing is, let's actually get some data on this. Don't take my word and my empirical evidence and my anecdotal evidence. Actually collect the statistics of crime other countries do. And when you look at countries like Denmark and Sweden and Germany and France, where they collect this data, you are actually seeing a huge uptick in assault and rape, largely from men who have come into the country, not the domestic population. If we do those basic things and realize we live in a wild, wild west of sexual proclivity, that we're actually having children sexualized from a young age, that pornification has become normalized, and on top of that, a load of men are coming from...
What group is sexualizing children from a young age? Think about it. They fly their flags off and push it in your face.
Countries who don't respect women's rights. You look at all of that, you analyze the data, and you talk about it. What I'm fed up with is being silenced about this, because women are being harassed, abused, assaulted, and raped on a daily basis. And this latest report demonstrates that we need to do something.
Well, they're finally talking about it, but only after it starts affecting women. All the men are like, we told you so. Didn't want to listen. Now you got to deal with it. I mean, look, we'll cover some of these videos too. White women are fair game. I'll cover that one later. Third world immigration is ruining this country. Breaking how Sweden ended the immigration crisis. It's happening in some of the comments because those are always interesting. It's not fetishized in other countries. The Quran tells them that they can legitimately abuse non-Muslim women. It's acceptable. And they call Slovakia racist for not wanting immigrants. Why aren't there hundreds of thousands of young single female migrants? If there are young single men, where are the women? It says 2 migrant men who apparently don't speak English assault women are found guilty, and the judge lets them off with a £2 a month penalty because not being able to speak English in jail would harm their well-being. Jeez. Says, when my daughter was a teenager in Paris, it was simply impossible for her to take the train alone to CDC airport. Why? Because it passes through the, quote, zone. I have no idea what this zone is. An area infested with you-know-who. They quite simply can't not bully, harass, and attempt to intimidate. Why is no one asking why they're coming here in such numbers from safe countries? And people are basically sharing stories. Says, to whoever read this, look what happened to a poor Australian woman in Paris yesterday, not in the mainstream media. And there's a million stories just like this happening all over Western Europe that's not getting media coverage because, again, it goes against the narrative and it doesn't look good on their policies. And these parties are wondering why they're losing seats at record levels. And they're having to do coalitions and combine their political might just to barely scrape on and hold on to power. I'm telling you, man, the pendulum is swinging back. We'll cover more of this because it's interesting and we're seeing it affect women directly. Are we going to see a massive conservative push amongst women of the indigenous demographic to these countries? Or will they continue supporting the policies that are affecting them in their day-to-day lives negatively? Remains to be seen. Who knows? What do you guys think? Let me know some of your stories in the comments below. Living in these countries, seeing your communities basically changing demographically overnight is what it seems like, and how that's affected you. I'm curious to read.